हेलो स्कोगोनॉट्स, माय नेम इज दिलशाद। वेलकम टू अनदर इंसाइटफुल ScogoLearnX एपिसोड, जहां हम आपको एक नई टेक्नोलॉजी से इंट्रोड्यूस कराएंगे, द फ्लाइंग ड्रोन्स, जो एग्जिस्टिंग लॉजिस्टिक इंडस्ट्री को एक बिल्कुल नई डायरेक्शन में ले जाएगा और आपको इस फ्यूचरिस्टिक चेंज के लिए प्रिपेयर और एलिवेट करेगा। सो लेट मी इंट्रोड्यूस टू अवर गेस्ट स्पीकर ऑफ द डे, मिस्टर संजय, जो आपको ड्रोन्स के बारे में बताएंगे और आपको क्रॉस स्किल करेंगे। सो लेट्स बिगिन।
Hi, good morning. Namaskar, everyone. Good to have you all here. Just wanted to take a few minutes maybe to share some things that would become very relevant for us very soon. Let's start here. Let's start by first asking ourselves, what exactly is a drone? Because a lot of people out there keep talking about drones and all the miraculous and magical things that they are doing with drones. But honestly, there really isn't much clarity in terms of what exactly is the drone. So let's try and figure that out first. So let's take a look at this, for example. If you were to look at this, some of these, maybe you will realize, yes, is very clearly a drone. For example, yes. But what if someone was to tell you that, no, this is actually also a drone? Or so is this, or is this a drone? So how do you define a drone? While you're doing that, you will also be thrown with terms like radio control aircraft, remotely piloted aircraft, all kinds of big terminology out there. As a result, it's become kind of confusing for all of us to try and figure out what exactly is a drone. So let's try and see what a drone is. And for that, we'll probably go back to what the DGCA tells us what a drone is. Now, what is DGCA? DGCA is actually the regulatory authority for all kinds of civil aviation in India. Now, that civil aviation includes drones. And what DGCA tells you is that drone means unmanned aircraft system. What they specifically mean is that if you have a system which is basically unmanned, it's an aircraft, and it's being remotely controlled. Now, here's the key thing out here. It should be remotely controlled wirelessly. Then it's a drone. Nowhere do they tell you that your drone needs to have pankhas on top or propellers on top or in the front or bottom. Nowhere do they tell you that your drone needs to look like this or that or whatever. The simple definition of drone is if it flies in the air, if it's remotely controlled wirelessly and there's nobody sitting out there on the aircraft, it's a drone. Simple as that. So the key terms that we are talking about over here is there has to be some unmanned aerial vehicle plus a remote station or a remote control. Okay. That unmanned aerial thing is also sometimes referred to as remotely piloted vehicle or remotely piloted aircraft. And having seen this, if we try and come back to this and try and figure out what exactly is a drone, a radio controlled boat is obviously not a drone because it's not aerial. A hexacopter, that is basically what you and me have typically known as drones with 6 propellers on top, is a drone. A Diwali balloon is obviously not a drone because it's not remotely controlled. Here's the interesting one. A radio controlled toy helicopter, the kind you get on Amazon or Flipkart or whatever else. It is an aerial vehicle, it is unmanned, and it is wirelessly remote controlled. So according to DGCA, yes, that is a drone. Then you have these big military aircraft, the ones made by DRDO and very often used by the US, definitely a drone. A typical radio controlled toy aircraft, the Chinese ones that you get in the market, again on Amazon or wherever else. If you notice, yes, it's aerial, it's unmanned, and it's wirelessly remote controlled. It is, therefore, a drone. Coming to air taxis, interestingly, no, they are not drones. Simple reason, they are not unmanned. You have somebody sitting out there on the machine, therefore, they are not classified as drones. Then you have these agri machines, the ones that we use for agricultural spraying, definitely a drone. Then you have these small toy gliders, toy planes that children throw around. Yes, they are aerial, they are unmanned, but they are not remotely controlled, so they are not drones. Diwali rocket, yes, of course, it's aerial, it's unmanned, but not controlled, so not a drone. RC toy car, kind of obvious. So that's what we mean when we say a drone. Interestingly, again, if you go back and look at it, nowhere did we talk about a drone having propellers on top or front or bottom or whatever else, or the shape and size or weight of a drone. Coming to now, what all things do we use drones for? Because typically, again, when we talk about drones, we have this mental picture of, a huge machine with multiple arms, propellers on top, maybe doing pizza delivery or whatever. Interestingly, there's a lot more that drones are currently doing and will do in the future. Let's take a quick look at some of these examples out here that we have. A quick video. Aerial photography is obviously the first one that we're going to talk about. Take a look. All the different shapes that we are looking at. Interesting one, drone delivery. The last one, obviously, is the one that we most frequently talk about, hear about. The military using machines to bomb places. Anyhow, having seen what all stuff that drones can be used for, maybe I think it's important to kind of realize that right now, if you're looking at 30, 40 different applications, there's a new one being created every single day, limited only by the imagination of what you can do with this machine. But before you go down that route, I mean, where you start talking about using drones for real life applications and what you can do with it, I think it's very important to understand the regulations that govern the current usage of drones and how these impact us, how these enable us to do things also at the same time. I'm not going to the detailed regulations, but there are important things out there that each one of us needs to know, irrespective of whether we currently use or have a drone or not, because even if you're planning to buy a toy drone, some of these things will impact you. Very quickly, so let's get into it. Where do you first of all find the regulations? Uh, the government of India has set up something called the Digital Sky Portal, which is run by the DGCA. You might want to kind of preserve these URLs out there. This is where the latest drone rules are available. At the same time, they keep making changes, addendums, notifications, whatever else, which sometimes go out on the Ministry of Civil Aviation website or the DGCA website itself, or sometimes the government being the government, they might put it out as a PIB release. PIB release is nothing but a standard government circular which goes out on the central government website out there. So important to note down these. Again, remember, the government will not come and tell you that these are the rules, these are not the rules, or they will not send you a text message saying, hey, we changed the rule out here. You need to go to these websites, follow the publications and try and figure out what is the latest thing that's happening out there and make sure that you follow it. The first thing when we talk about the regulations is, what all do these regulations apply to? They apply to all kinds of drones, all kinds of people who own, operate, lease, repair, do whatever with drones. So it's not like you can say, मैंने अपने friend का दो drone ले लिया, photography कर रहा था, rules don't apply to me. No, sir, it doesn't work that way. If you have a drone, if you're operating it, whether you borrowed it, whatever, the rules apply to you. And it doesn't matter whether your machine is what, 50 grams or 200 grams or whatever, anything from 0 grams to 500 kg, you are covered under the drone rules. Simple as that. You will be exempted from the drone rules, obviously, if you work for the military, which most of us don't. So we'll skip that part. Maybe we'll come back to this later on. Let's talk about the interesting thing that a lot of the media guys keep pushing on us and try and figure out what exactly do they mean by the classification of drones. And you will keep hearing these terms like nano, micro, small, whatever. Basically, when the DGCA came up with these drone rules, they split the drones into various weight categories. Honestly, if you look at these terms, nano, micro, small, medium, large, okay, these are more for the kind of payload and the total weight that the machine carries. Most of us would be stuck maybe from between nano to small kind of category, because beyond that becomes really advanced, heavy. Important thing to note out here is when DGCA talks about the weight here, they're talking about the total weight of your drone. So you can't have a drone which says, let's say, weighs 2 kgs and can carry 500 grams on top of that, and you say, boss, my drone weighs 2 kgs. No. DGCA will include the weight of the payload when they try to classify this. Interestingly, in the Drone Rules 2021, which is the latest version we are working with, we created a new subcategory called MRPA, Model Remotely Piloted Aircraft, which could be all the way from 1 gram to 25 grams. This subclassification or subcategory is specifically meant for drones, which are not meant for commercial use. So let's say today you go out there and buy yourself a drone, which you're using for your own personal photography needs. Or maybe you want to drop flower petals on your dear one or whatever. As long as you're not using it commercially, it would get classified as MRPA. The interesting thing about MRPAs is that the kind of restrictions or regulations that apply to it are slightly less constrictive compared to commercial drones. The most important restriction, though, however, is that no MRPA can be flown beyond visual line of sight. That means whenever you're flying it, you should be able to see it with your naked eyes. Okay? Now, to try and understand better and how these rules apply to us, simple way of remembering the whole thing is ask yourself, what are you flying? Why are you flying? And where are you flying? Because all these three things are relevant for you. Let's start with the what bit. The rules are very clear. Every drone that you have, you operate, you own, you do whatever with, has to be registered. Okay? In reality, though, when you try to register a drone, let's say which weighs 100 grams or anything less than 250 grams, they currently do not have that option enabled. Although on the rules, on paper, it very clearly says, yes, it needs to be registered. What that basically means is that if you go to Amazon or whatever and buy your kid or yourself one of these toy drones, you will need to register it. Coming back to the regulations, we spoke about what are we flying. Obviously, if you're flying MRPA, which is basically education, research, design, personal use. Okay? You don't need to have a pilot license. You don't need a type certificate. The next question to ask, therefore, is why am I flying? And this is where I just mentioned. If you are flying commercially, now what do they mean by commercial? So let's say you have a drone, you take it to your friend's wedding, start doing photography out there and charge them for it, it becomes commercial. Okay? The moment you start flying commercial, the rules are very clear. You need to have a pilot license. Simple as that. For which you will need to undergo a formal training course, appear for the exam, and then DGCA will issue you a license. So just to summarize the whole thing out here, if you look at this again, up to 25 kgs, if you're not flying commercially, MRPA. Okay. Okay. So again, coming back to like the classification that we were talking about, the rules are very simple. If you are flying commercially, you need to have a pilot license. Simple as that. And for that, the process, like I was saying earlier, is you will need to undergo a formal training course. You will need to give a written exam, flying exam, and then the DGCA issues you what they call a pilot's license. If you're not flying commercially, if you're flying only for your personal needs, no license required, provided your drone is less than 25 kgs. Okay. And if it's less than 2 kgs, you don't even need a type certificate. Type certificate is nothing but a certification from the government saying that your machine is legal to fly in the Indian airspace. Having seen this, here's the part which is extremely important for all of us, irrespective of whether you're flying commercially, non-commercially, whether you're flying nano, micro, small. The government has basically split the whole country into 3 zones. And the rules for these zones are very simple. If it's a red zone, you're not allowed to fly, period. It doesn't matter whether you have a small toy drone, small RC helicopter, or whatever. If you're in the red zone, government says you are not allowed to fly. Then there are these massive yellow zones where, yes, you are allowed to fly, but you will need permission, prior permission from the local air traffic controller. So let's say you're flying somewhere around Nasik. Most of Nasik zone, for example, is a yellow zone. You will need to go and approach the air traffic controller out there, take permission, and then you can fly. Realistically, it doesn't happen. So if you really break it down, red and yellow zones are basically no-go zones for you, which leaves a huge part of the country, which is actually a green zone, where you're allowed to fly without any kind of prior permission. You're allowed to fly commercially. You're allowed to fly nano, micro, small, whatever else you have. And where do you go and find these zones? On the Digital Sky portal, if you go there and look at it very carefully, there's a zoomable map given out there. You can zoom into any part of the country that you want, your current location, for example, and you'll know whether it's a red, yellow, or green. Interestingly, if you look at the map, most urban areas are red zones. So whether you look at Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, Bangalore, all red zones. And this is extremely important because flying in a red zone, if you're caught, they'll put all kinds of whatever Indian police regulations they have on you and put you behind bars. Okay? So again, just to kind of summarize, a red zone is no-go unless you have prior permission from the central government, which you and me are not getting. Yellow, if you have permission from the local air traffic controller, which again, you and me normally don't get. So normal human beings, whether they are flying commercially or not commercially, need to be flying in the green zone. Again, within the green zone, they put certain height restrictions, which actually don't matter because 400 feet is normally high enough for us to you and me fly. It's enough for us to do things. The only restriction that applies in a green zone, though, is your drone should again be within visual line of sight, which means you should be able to see it with the naked eye. That regulation is currently being enhanced, so maybe that might be taken off very soon in the near future, because it's very relevant when you're talking about drone deliveries or whatever else, that your drone might actually need to fly beyond your line of sight. But the rules keep getting enhanced, modified as time goes by. So hopefully that will come into place very soon. Talking about drone delivery specifically, here's what the government actually put out way back in July 2022. They made it very clear that they don't have a problem with drone deliveries. So they actually put out a PIB circular, a notification out there, which says private players can use drones for drone delivery in accordance with the drone rules of 2021, which is what we just spoke about. So going forward, yes, the government is trying to encourage new areas of drone applications. They are very much in favor of doing interesting things with drones. It's just that the rules and the technology will need a little bit of more time to kind of align themselves and for things to start happening on the ground. Let's talk a little bit more about drone delivery specifically, because this is actually a huge interest area. Why do we need drone delivery? I mean, why on earth would anybody even bother about drone delivery? Very simple. One, it's faster. It's more efficient. More cost savings are there. Of course, your customer has an enhanced experience. I mean, actually, I've just listed down a few points here, but you can actually list down a whole number of things on why delivery through drones makes a lot of sense. Of course, there are downsides. Some people will lose jobs. I mean, so typically, if you have a guy sitting on a bicycle going from one place to another, a drone will obviously be better than him. There are obviously privacy and security concerns. I mean, people have problems with drones flying all over the planet, all over the buildings. But these are things I think that come with any new technology and not too much of a concern area for us right now. Getting into more detail about drone delivery, let's say we want to start drone delivery. Doesn't matter what it is, whether it's pizzas or maybe you want to deliver parcels or whatever else. Again, start with basic, simple questions. What do you want to deliver? Where do you want to deliver? Because this will decide the process that you follow, the kind of drone that you use, the kind of regulations that will apply to you, everything else. Let's look at, for example, what do you want to deliver? Technically, it could be anything. Medicines, emergency supplies, spare parts. I mean, for example, Volkswagen right now is already delivering parts from one manufacturing plant to another using drones. Of course, you might have heard about Amazon talking big about delivery through drones. Walmart is doing it right now in the US. So, in all, of course, they have big plans. But again, in the US, food delivery is already happening through drones. Technically, there's no limit to what you can deliver. The reason it's important to you is you need to look at the weight of what you want to deliver, the volume, the total box size or dimensions of what you want to carry, because that will determine the size of your drone. The last thing that you might want to look at is survivability. Basically, like there are things that you can, for example, pick up through a drone and drop from the air. There are things that you will need to pick up on a drone and actually land to be able to drop it. That becomes very relevant when you're talking about drone deliveries. And we'll talk about this in a bit more detail very soon. Where do you want to deliver? Right now in India, like I said, the most important thing to look at is, are you delivering within line of sight or beyond line of sight? Right now, the rules do not allow beyond line of sight. They are working towards it. It will happen. But it's something very relevant for us right now. Second thing, whether you're flying in urban area, rural area, whatever, again, the rules will change. Your flight environment will change. You need to look at the kind of weather that you'll be flying in. I mean, you can't fly, let's say, from a place like Bombay. And if you're going offshore, the weather might be totally different out there. And then the security area, it's a high security, high risk area. You might not be able to land your drone. So that becomes very relevant. And what kind of drones do we use for delivery? There are three basic types. The first being fixed wing, where you have a simple aircraft looking like thing, which flies in the air. Typically, these do not land. They just drop your payload from the air and fly back. The payload comes down using a parachute or similar mechanism. Very commonly used in the US right now. Very commonly used in Africa by a company called Zipline right now. Then you have these hybrid machines, which have wings and propellers or rotors, whatever you want to call them. These things can take off vertically, they can land vertically, but they are extremely efficient because for horizontal flight, cruising, they have wings, so they can cover a huge amount of distance and basically try and take advantage of, carrying good payloads long distances. The third type, which is the most common one that the media keeps talking about, is the so-called standard drone that you and me kind of always visualize. Typical machine with rotors on top, can take off vertically, land vertically. Unfortunately, these machines, because of the design, cannot go very far, so the range is limited. And in terms of safety, these are comparatively low safety machines because those propellers that are spinning up there can be extremely dangerous, especially when you're trying to drop the payload or land to drop the payload. In terms of the usage, hybrid machines are right now the most commonly used machines for delivery. Talking about the typical process, very simple approach. One simple approach could be you basically pick up a load, fly, land, and then you drop the load, or somebody takes out the load from your drone, and then you go back to your point of origin. You would typically use this kind of process or mechanism where you have sensitive loads. Let's say, for example, you're trying to deliver human organs or something, fragile parts. This is the kind of process that you would typically follow. You would need people at both ends, obviously, to load, unload, whatever else. And given the fact that you're landing and then taking off again, going back, you might need to refuel at the drop point. The other commonly used mechanism is you don't land, you pick up the payload, you fly in the air and do an airdrop through a parachute or a tethered line or whatever else. And then just you fly back. Again, this is used very commonly for medical emergency deliveries, very commonly used by zipline in Africa, for example, right now, to drop vaccines, medicines, everything else. You get much longer range with this kind of process, but obviously we can't handle sensitive loads. So that's how it works, very simple. Here are the big guys out there in terms of drone delivery. Interestingly, you'll not notice any Swiggy or Amazon out here. Zipline is the one that I keep talking about, which the whole world knows. The reason I'm putting these up here is so that you get an idea of the kind of load that they carry and the kind of distance that they're already covering for drone deliveries. Look at Zipline, for example. They're already doing deliveries over a range of 24 miles. That's huge. Again, UPS in the US is doing delivery for third parties, by the way. They are right now delivering human organs from one hospital to another. The range that they're talking about is typically 20 miles. Mana, again, which is based out of Ireland, they have their own custom designed machines, 10 miles. So technology-wise, we are very much there. People are already doing it. Coming to India, maybe the regulations need to catch up a bit, and maybe a little bit of more effort is required from our side to make things happen out here. So what are the challenges we face in India specifically? Regulations, honestly, are one big bottleneck. Right now, like I said, the government does not allow BVOLS, beyond visual line of sight, which is actually a big hindrance. Two, we don't have enough skilled manpower. In a country of, let's say, what, 1.4 billion we are right now? If the government says, boss, for drone deliveries, you need certified drone pilots, we have just less than 10,000 of them out there. If you don't have enough manpower to kind of really have drone deliveries take off in a big way. Very sadly, again, there are no Indian design or Indian made drones which are reliable enough for drone deliveries. People are working in that direction. Things will change. Other big concern, and this is one of the biggest things that I think you and me need to kind of start thinking about, is safety and security. I mean, one classic example that I keep giving to people is, boss, today we live in a country where you can't leave your bloody slippers outside the mandir, yeah? You can't leave your bicycle unlocked. So if you really want drone deliveries to take off, I mean, are you expecting me to send up a machine which is costing about 6 lakhs, 7 lakhs, and then having somebody sitting on the terrace pull it down? It's something that we need to talk about and then think about if we want our country to progress. On the other hand, again, given the cheap labor that is available in our country, there's obviously cheap alternatives available. Somebody might sitting on a motorbike might say, "Saab, मैं 10 रुपए में deliver करके आता हूँ, कुछ भी करो." And there goes your whole business case study, use case study for a drone delivery goes out of the window. But yes, I mean, I do see this happening because there are use cases where none of these would actually matter, and the only option left with you might be use a drone. In real life, during the COVID pandemic, the government itself was actually delivering vaccines to remote areas using drones. So yes, has to be done, needs to be done, and will be done very soon. What does the future look like for all of us? Costs are obviously going to reduce even further. Technology, like I said, is already there. The use cases are limited only by our imagination. The kind of students I deal with, for example, keep coming up with new ideas every day on what they want to do with drones. And obviously, needless to say, customer expectations are increasing. Right now, for example, Vedanta Mines wants to use drones for delivering stuff across their mines. They also want to use the same drones for surveying the mines and figuring out what's happening. So people are coming up with ideas, expectations are increasing, and the industry will have to deliver. Quick question answers. I mean, some common questions that I typically encounter. How far can drone fly? I've given you some examples. Technically, the bigger the battery, the more fuel you have, the longer you can fly. But there is obviously a plateau where you need to kind of balance out that if I have a big battery, my weight increases, therefore I can't fly too far. But as you must have seen, in the US, they're already doing 20 miles, 30 miles, piece of cake. How much weight can the machine carry? Basically depends on the design. When we typically design these drones, what we typically aim for is that 25% of the weight, total takeoff weight, should be reserved for the payload. So if I have, let's say, a machine which has a takeoff weight of 1 kilo, you can say that it will have a payload of around 250 grams. Interestingly, people again ask this question very often, that if I need to get into drone delivery, drone operations, or whatever else, do I need IIT type engineers, BTechs, or whatever else? Simple answer is no. There are people out there who are willing to learn. Quite a bit of talent available out there. We need to train them, bring them up to the mark, and it can be done. So that's about it. I would like to end the session here. Thank you very much, all of you.
नमस्कार, मैं पार्थप्रतिम मालाकार फ्रॉम सिलचर आसाम से। मैं पिछले 4 साल से स्कोगो के साथ में जुड़ा हुआ हूँ और काफ़ी सारी चीज़ों के अलावा मैं ड्रोन फ्लाइंग का काम कर रहा हूँ। तो सबसे पहले मैं ये बताना चाहता हूँ कि ड्रोन फ्लाइंग का जो काम होता है ना, वो काफ़ी हद तक ये नया टेक्नोलॉजी है। इसमें बहुत सारे सेक्टर में काम हो रहा है। जैसे पहले सिर्फ शादी या फिर प्री वेडिंग वो शूट में ड्रोन का इस्तेमाल होता था, या फिर बहुत सारे महंगे जो ड्रोन होते हैं तो वो वीडियोग्राफी के लिए यूज़ होता था। अभी हाल ही में ये मतलब 2-3 साल से ये सर्वे सेक्टर में, इंडिया में सर्वे सेक्टर में इसका उपयोग हो रहा है। काफ़ी जो सर्वे का काम होता है, जैसे रोड्स, ब्रिजेस या फिर कोई लैंड सर्वे वगैरह, उसमें ड्रोन का इस्तेमाल हो रहा है और ये बहुत ही कम समय में ये काम कर लेता है। इसका स्कोप आगे बहुत ज़्यादा है। ये नया टेक्नोलॉजी है और 2022 में जैसे हमारे प्रधानमंत्री जी ने ड्रोन महोत्सव का आयोजन किया था, तो उसका मतलब यही है कि ये सेक्टर में एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेट करने के लिए और इससे अच्छा एक करियर बन सकता है। आप बहुत सारे इंस्टीट्यूट है, उसमें जाके आप पायलट का लाइसेंस ले सकते हैं। पायलट लाइसेंस इसलिए ज़रूरी है कि आपको इसकी सही जानकारी मिले कि इसको कैसे इस्तेमाल करना है, कहाँ पे करना है, कितना मतलब कहाँ पे रेस्ट्रिक्शन है, कहाँ पे इसका इस्तेमाल किया जा सकता है, किस किस सावधानियाँ इसके लिए ज़रूरी है, ये सब है। और सबसे अच्छा चीज़ है कि जो सर्वे का वर्क होता है उसमें एक चीज़ का आपका आसानी हो जाता है कि जैसे कि टोटल स्टेशन सर्वे हो गया, फिर या डंपी लेवल हो, या फिर दूसरे तरह के सर्वे में जो बहुत समय लेता है, वही चीज़ आप ड्रोन से बहुत ही आसानी से बहुत ही कम समय में कर सकते हैं। इससे इनकम बहुत अच्छा है। इसका अभी जैसे नया है, अभी 2-3 साल से ये शुरुआत हुआ है। पिछले था, लेकिन पिछला वाला बहुत महंगा है। आगे इसका बहुत स्कोप आने वाला है। इसमें बहुत सारी चीज़ें, नए चीज़ें अभी जुड़ रहे हैं और इससे आप लोग बहुत अच्छा इसका करियर बना सकते हैं। फ़ोटोग्राफ्स और वो मैंने शेयर किया हुआ था, तो इससे आप देख सकते हैं कि टोपोग्राफी सर्वे जो होता है, एरियल टोपोग्राफी सर्वे, उसमें इसका इस्तेमाल बहुत अच्छे से आता है। तो इसमें एडिशनल यही है कि इससे आप फ़ोटोग्राफ कोऑर्डिनेट सब कुछ ले सकते हैं, ताकि जो कि इसका आर्किटेक्ट होगा, फिर डिज़ाइनर जो भी है, इनके लिए बहुत आसानी होगा। तो इससे आप लोग एक अच्छा उसको शुरुआत कर सकते हैं।